You hear this phrase all the time, right? The rules-based international order. But what does China hear when Western nations say that? Well, to really get a handle on one of the most critical relationships of our time, we've got to look at a history the West tends to forget, but that China can never, ever forget. Let's dive in.
And that just nails it, doesn't it? This isn't just about politics or trade deals. At its core, it's about a deep historical wound that honestly shapes every single interaction between China and the West today.
And right here, this is the fundamental disconnect. The West says rules-based order and thinks of partnership, of shared laws. China hears those exact same words and sees a system that was designed to keep it down. So to understand why, we have to go back to a period they call the Century of Humiliation. Now, this isn't just a chapter in a history book. For China, this is the origin story of its modern identity. It's the lens through which it views the entire world, and especially the West. Okay, so let's set the scene. In the early 1800s, China is powerful, it's self-sufficient, it's kind of the center of its own universe. It has all the things Europe desperately wants: silk, tea, porcelain. The problem for Britain, though, China wants basically nothing in return, except for silver. And Britain is starting to run out. And this is where that trade problem spirals into a century of conflict. You see, this wasn't just one single event. It was a relentless, 100-year-long assault on China's sovereignty. Britain's solution to its trade problem was to get millions of Chinese citizens addicted to opium, which it trafficked from British India. And when China tried to stop it, Britain declared war. The trigger was this: 1,000 tons of illegal, confiscated opium. A Chinese official had it destroyed, and in response, Britain went to war. Not for ideals, not for freedom, but to protect its state-sponsored drug trade. And China, with its totally outdated military, lost badly. After that first defeat, the floodgates just opened. This led to what are now known as the unequal treaties. And really, the name says it all. These weren't fair deals. They were demands made by powers with modern warships and cannons, essentially carving up China piece by piece. It gets worse. By 1900, the Chinese people tried to fight back in what was called the Boxer Rebellion. They wanted to expel all these foreign forces. Well, an alliance of 8 nations, including the US, came in and crushed them. In the punishment, China was forced to pay the equivalent of billions of dollars today, basically as compensation for having been invaded. And I really want to stress this. This memory is so alive in China today. It's taught in every school. The entire legitimacy of the modern Chinese state is built on one single promise: ending this humiliation and making sure it never, ever happens again. So in 1949, the Century of Humiliation officially comes to an end. A new government takes over. But did that end the mistrust? Oh, not even close. When Mao Zedong spoke these words, it was absolutely electric. It was a declaration to the world, and more importantly to the Chinese people themselves, that the era of being pushed around by foreign powers was officially over. But from China's perspective, the West's response wasn't welcome back. It was containment. They got hit with a full trade embargo. They were kept out of the UN for decades, and they found themselves surrounded by US military bases. The message they heard was loud and clear: you might have stood up, but we still don't accept you as an equal. And this wasn't just diplomatic maneuvering. It got very real. In the Korean War, Chinese and American soldiers fought and died in huge numbers. From Beijing's point of view, American forces were right on their doorstep, posing a direct threat to the security they had just fought so hard to win. And it came at a staggering human cost. So, all of that brings us to today. Because you have to understand, every modern dispute, whether it's about trade, technology, or territory, is still viewed through this exact same historical lens of deep-seated mistrust. Think about it. In the 2000s, China joins the World Trade Organization. It opens up its economy. It plays the game by the West's rules. But from its perspective, the second it started getting really good at that game, maybe too good, the rules suddenly started to change. I mean, just look at technology. For years, it was a great partnership. Western companies got cheap manufacturing, China got jobs and development. Everybody was happy. But as soon as Chinese companies like Huawei started competing at the highest levels of tech, they were suddenly branded national security threats. The way China sees it, the West was fine with us being their factory, but not with us being a competitor. Okay, now let's think about the military picture. The US Navy regularly sails warships through the South China Sea, thousands of miles from American shores, all in the name of freedom of navigation. China sees this as intimidation. And to get their perspective, you really just have to flip the scenario.
Just imagine that for a second. Chinese aircraft carriers and destroyers running military drills off the coast of Florida or Texas. It's completely unthinkable for Washington, right? But from Beijing's perspective, that's exactly what the US military does right off their coastline, all the time.
Then you have this moment, a moment that is absolutely seared into the modern Chinese memory, but is almost completely forgotten here in the West. In 1999, during the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia, 5 US precision bombs slammed into the Chinese embassy in Belgrade.
The official explanation from the US was that it was a terrible accident caused by an old map. Now, for China, this was just impossible to believe. An embassy is sovereign territory. It's supposed to be untouchable under the very international laws the West claims to champion. So, whether it was a tragic mistake or something else, the message China received was absolutely clear and devastating. The rules are optional, and when Western interests are on the line, Chinese lives and Chinese sovereignty are, well, expendable.
And all of this brings us to the single most important takeaway. For China, this isn't about holding on to old grudges. This deep historical memory is the actual software running in the background of its foreign policy today. So when you hear these phrases on the news, you have to realize there are two completely different dictionaries at play. What the West calls a rules-based order for global stability, China hears as the system you designed to your advantage when we were weak. Free trade is seen as free only until we start beating you. And human rights is often viewed as a political weapon you use against your rivals, but conveniently ignore when it comes to your friend.
And this really leaves us with the critical question for our time. You see, trust requires vulnerability, and China's entire modern history has taught it that vulnerability leads to exploitation. It requires a degree of forgetting, and China has made remembering a cornerstone of its national identity. Now, this doesn't mean conflict is a sure thing, but it does point toward a future where two global giants operate on completely different assumptions, forever shaped by the long, dark shadow